Hey guys, so this is going to be a bit of a shorter video where I just want to talk about the kind of equipment that you're usually going to be using in XP mod and how to set up your equipment for anyone who's a bit newer. When you join a server you should see this thing on the left, but if you don't, then don't worry about it. If you want to bring up the XPM menu, all you have to do is type XPM in chat. And that is the only important command you're going to have to really memorize. So you can choose your survivor that you want with 1, as you can see. At any time you can press 0 to remove the menu if it's bringing up something you don't want to see, you just want to focus on the gameplay. I'm just going to ignore these infected who are almost certainly ruining my video, very rudely. Okay, maybe I won't completely ignore them. And yes, if you go on to 2, you'll see change your equipment. Now, there's quite a lot you can change here, but first of all, of course, is your primary weapon, which is the most important. There's a secondary slot, explosive slot, health slot, health boost slot, and of course you can choose to have a laser sight, which there's literally no reason not to have one, so I would, highly recommend doing that. And 8 is just if you decide, actually I want to change my survivor. And on most of these menus you can press 9 to go back to the main menu. So yeah, in terms of which weapons you should use, that depends on the character that you pick. Because, as some of you will already know, every single one of these survivors, for the most part, specialises with some kind of weapon. If we have a quick look at the survivors, Bill specialises in assault rifles, Rochelle specialises in snipers, Coach specialises both in shotguns and melees, including the chainsaw, Ellis specialises in all weapons, Nick specialises in the Magnum, however that's a secondary weapon, so we'll get back to that, and Lewis specialises in submachine guns. So, let's go bring up that equipment menu again. Of course, you never really see the names of the guns in Left 4 Dead, so you certainly couldn't be blamed for not recognising the guns by their in-game names. So, let's go over what each of these guns are. First of all, if we look at the submachine guns, which you'd only really be using if you picked Lewis most likely, because none of these are particularly good, I find that the Israeli is usually the best choice with Lewis. This is just because Lewis is built around the idea that you get rewarded for landing headshots, and the Israeli is the most precise SMG, and all of these don't have great damage output, so the Israeli tends to be the best, especially ever since Lewis got nerfed to not be allowed to have a laser sight. He used to be allowed to have one, but people were too precise with him to the point where, especially skilled players, could get a stupid amount of reward for landing non-stop headshots. The Silence Mac 10 is the weapon I'm holding right now, and is typically the worst submachine gun, and the MP5 is the other one you might want to use if you prefer some DPS over precision. As you can see, second here we have assault rifles. The AK is going to be your assault rifle of choice in most cases. In fact, how about I choose my survivor right now and confirm and continue to ignore all the chaos happening around me with the bots. So yeah, with my current character, the AK gets a whole bunch more ammo, because I'm Bill, who specialises in assault rifles, which the AK is, which is why, of course, it's got 140 ammo instead of 40. But obviously, it'd be 40 if it was in the normal game. The M16A2 is the 50 ammo machine gun in the game, assault rifle. The SIG, I believe is one of the CSGO weapons. I must admit I don't memorize that one. And the Scar L is the 60 ammo one. The Scar L, I believe, is technically considered the highest tier assault rifle, and so it technically has the best DPS. However, it's not particularly accurate, and its fire rate isn't consistent, it's sort of in bursts, which means that usually the AK is preferred, since it's actually surprisingly accurate for an assault rifle. So, yeah. That being said, the M16 is also relatively precise, so honestly, all of these are decent choices, except the SIG. So, yeah, I recommend sticking with the AK, but you can definitely try the others if you feel the others are more worthwhile. Then it gets to shotguns. So, all you really need to know is that the top 2 shotguns are the 2 pump shotguns, which of course are the weaker shotguns. But then there's the Benelli and the Spaz. Now, when I played this game when I was younger, I was always under the impression that the Spaz was the best shotgun, and I believe in terms of DPS it is, however it's got one big problem. Even compared to most other shotguns, it has an enormous amount of spread, which means that it only really works right in the enemy's faces. Whereas the Benelli, considering it's a shotgun, is actually pretty accurate as long as you are able to crouch while using it. Even smokers on rooftops, as long as they're not too high in the air, you can often take out with just a couple shots from a Benelli, as long as you crouch first before you shoot. Now, of course, you might still pick the Spaz over the Benelli if you care more about that damage, but usually precision's more important, so I recommend the Benelli over the Spaz. They both have 10 bullets in a clip, and they both shoot pretty fast for a shotgun. When it comes to snipers, it's a bit more interesting. You might have thought that the obvious answer would simply be the H&K MSG-90, which is the 30-bullet sniper, which is, you know, typically the best in the game. I think some people call it the military sniper rifle, and a lot of people call the Ruger Mini, the top one, the hunting rifle. The one that has 15 bullets. Will you get out of my face? The Scout and the AWP are the new bolt-action rifles taken from CSGO, which, yeah, they're both garbage. So, we don't have to talk about those. But the reason why snipers are interesting to talk about is because while the H&K MSG is the obvious best pick in the base game, the character who specializes in sniper rifles, Rochelle, is I believe the only character in the mod who actually gets different benefits depending on the specific sniper she picks. This makes the hunting rifle also a very valid choice. It allows you to reload really quickly, which can't be said for the H&K. However, the hunting rifle only gets 7 bullets in a clip with Rochelle instead of 15, whereas the H&K gets 60 bullets in a clip and sets zombies on fire, as well as poisoning them. Of course, there's one other category here though, special weapons. These include the grenade launcher and the M60 machine gun. Not that you're going to necessarily be wanting to pick these often, because honestly, you might be surprised to hear it, but the grenade launcher is really weak in XP mod. Because although there is a character planned to use it, right now there isn't a character in the mod who is able to get any benefits for using the grenade launcher. And as you can imagine, because of all the abilities which scale up damage on certain survivors, the average health of infected is increased in this mod, which makes it so that the grenade launcher actually is not very effective in XP mod with any character really, and so is basically always a bad choice. Not to mention, even in the base game it had a very long reload time and it was hard not to friendly fire with it. The M60 also isn't really popular, however you definitely could use it with Bill. He actually does get double damage when using the M60 because his bind 2 is to instantly equip an M60 even if he doesn't have one right now. Which means that you can technically start the game with an M60, and when it runs out of ammo, use Bill's Bind 2 to give you another one, and when that runs out, use it again to give him another one, and then when that runs out, getting a fourth and final one. As for secondaries, well, I'd highly recommend with the majority of characters obviously going for a melee, and if you didn't already know, the katana is basically objectively the best melee in the game. So essentially, you should equip a katana with any character who doesn't want the magnum. The katana simply is the fastest attacking, highest damage melee in the game. The only thing I might be outclassed on, I'm not sure if this is true, but in my experience it feels like the axe has a bit more range than the katana. Other than that, the katana is just objectively better than every other melee in the game in all aspects. I don't see anyone using it in particular, but Coach does get some extra benefits with the chainsaw, so if you wanted to try them out, then you could use the chainsaw, but most people who use Coach just prefer to use the katana, since you can instantly slash with it instead of having to, you know, rev up the chainsaw. Which brings us to the sidearms. These are just the pistol, the dual-wield pistols, and the magnum. The main reason you're going to use these is because Nick, as I mentioned before, specializes in pistols, and specifically the Magnum. Although he is able to use dual-wield pistols as well and gets a damage boost, ammo boost, reload speed boost with those, the Magnum is typically what is used with Nick. This is because with Nick, the Magnum deals an enormous amount of damage but only gets 3 bullets in a clip, and it still has a very long reload time. This leads to him having an interesting playstyle where he technically doesn't have very good DPS at all if you're counting his DPS in terms of constant non-stop firing. But the burst damage from managing to kill what you want to kill before you need to reload is enormous. I believe he's even the only character in the entire mod capable of one-shotting a charger just with his normal gun. And in fairness, that's with a headshot, but even with body shots, Nick can two-shot a charger. Other than that though, no other character really tends to use anything but the katana. There is occasionally some Ellis players who would like to use pistols instead of the katana, since Ellis doesn't get any benefit from using melees, but he does get a benefit for using any other kind of gun. The thing is that usually your melee is the most valuable because your melee tends to be better at dealing with commons than a gun. So it's taking up your secondary slot with another gun rather than getting a melee, even if you get extra benefits for using guns, usually isn't the best idea, especially since Ellis can already carry 2 primary weapons simultaneously for his guns as one of his abilities, so it's not like you necessarily need 2 weapons. However, there is one good reason to use pistols with Ellis, although it is relatively niche, which is of course that when he goes down, he will then have the Magnum or the dual wields, whichever one you picked, and he'll be able to do a lot of damage despite the fact he's a down teammate, which is quite useful in fairness. This brings us to the explosive slot, which tends to be the same for most characters. Essentially, you either take the Molotov or the Bile Jar. You might take the Pipe Bomb sometimes, but the Pipe Bomb isn't helpful at all against tanks, and it's kind of useful to have something that can be good for taking out tanks. Although in fairness, the reason why I say Molotov or Bile Jar when the Molotov is typically the grenade of choice when it comes to tanks in vanilla Left 4 Dead is that XP mod includes a very popular tank called the Fire Tank, which is immune to fire, but it also includes another tank called the Necro Tanker, who is immune to bile bombs. So it kind of depends on what you think they're going to pick. If you're expecting a fire tank, you would rather take a Bile Jar. If you're expecting a Necro Tanker, you would rather take a Molotov. In fact, the Molotov is very effective against the Necro Tanker. It almost hard counters it. But that's of course the problem, is you don't know which one they're going to pick, so you don't know what you want to bring. Typically, I lean towards the Molotov, just because I feel like the Molotov is the most generally applicable, and while the Bile Jar is useful against the fire tank, it's not very useful against the other tanks typically. For this reason, I personally tend to use the Molotov with just about every survivor, except Lewis, who I mentioned gets extra rewards for landing headshots, so often you actually like to summon hordes on purpose as Lewis to get more headshots. Of course, you do that using the Bile Jar. For your health slot, as you can imagine, most people just go with the first aid kit. However, you can certainly take a defib or incendiary ammo if you want instead. You used to be able to pick explosive ammo, but it was too OP, as you could imagine, so yeah. Now it's just these 3. Incendiary ammo doesn't tend to be very powerful in this game, so I don't think it's really worth it usually, but in fairness, you usually don't need an extra medkit on everyone, because you still have the 4 safe room medkits. So the defib is a good option and the first aid kit is a good option, it's just whichever one you want. You might be thinking surely the first aid kit will be useless if you start every single match with 4 first aid kits anyway and you can't hold more than 1 and there's only 4 of you. Well, there are characters in this game who can do extra things with medkits. The main 2 examples being that Lewis can turn medkits into pills, and he can hold multiple pills at once, and he gets lots of health from pills, so he wants to do that. In fact, pills are probably more valuable than medkits to Lewis players. As well as that, Nick gains maximum health boosts every single time someone else on his team heals besides him. Which means if you have a Nick on your team, you're going to want to use all those extra medkits to give him a permanent plus 15 to his maximum health. Finally, there's the health boost slot, which obviously only has 2 options, the adrenaline or the pain pills. Now, sure, it doesn't really matter that much what you pick, but personally I would always go for the adrenaline, unless you're playing Lewis. That's just because adrenaline is so insanely valuable in this game. I know it might not do as much healing, but the speed and the action speed and like movement speed, it's just insanely valuable. There are so many games where I clutch up because I took adrenaline, and I feel like it's just almost objectively better than the pills. Sorry about this format of the video. As you can imagine, you can't really play this mod since it's a server, single player. So I'm joining a sort of private XP mod server, but it's still sort of made to play itself on its own with just bots whenever someone's not there. So I unfortunately can't just tell the zombies to stop attacking us. Lastly, here's a little look at the extras menu. Most of these options aren't going to be too important to you, so we'll just cover the ones that matter. You can change teams anytime you want using the extras menu. I know you can already change teams in-game using the M button, however, if you've already reached the maximum number of swaps, you can't swap this way. However, you can still swap using the XPM menu, and you can even swap to the spectators if you'd like. Which, now I think of it, I probably should have been in spectator this whole time, but I didn't think of that until now. On top of that, you can also look at statistics, which is basically just who did the best on the last round, who got the most kills, who did the most damage to the survivors, etc. There's the options, but the options is mostly just for if you have the XPM add-on, you can see the options there. And there's obviously Get XPM add-on, there's a link to the XP mod website, but just be careful, the 6th option is Ban Me. Yeah, that will literally just ban you from the servers if you select it by accident. Don't do that. The reason why this option exists, if you're wondering, is because obviously there's some people who really don't want to play on modded servers, and unfortunately, modded servers are in the pool with non-modded servers when you look for a game in Left 4 Dead. There's just nothing you can do about that. So if someone joins and they don't want to play XP mod, then they can choose to ban themselves so they never get put into an XP mod server again.